Man, another day of kicking that music off. Doesn't it just like get in your veins, John? Welcome back, difference makers. It is another week and another episode. We're cruising into this new year. I'm telling you what, like, I've got an awesome guest. We were just jamming here in this episode, and like at first he was like, "What are we going to talk about? And you know, what are we going to do, and how are we going to serve the entrepreneurs out there?" And it's like we've got so much out there, and this guy has so much energy and excitement. So I'm super excited to bring him to you. And by the way, he's traveled was it like 2.5 hours?
2 hours.
About 2 hours to get here, and that's so cool.
You're worth 2 hours.
Yeah, man, John, I appreciate that. But it's so awesome because it's been one of the goals to get this podcast growing and growing. And I've had people from all over the world virtually, but to get somebody to travel a couple hours to come out, man, John, I feel like I'm making it big time. I have people traveling out to my podcast. That's super awesome. That's super cool.
Absolutely a pleasure.
Thanks for coming out, man. So speaking of that, you know, I am on a mission this year. Last year was a big step in this podcast and taking it to another level, being in this beautiful studio, downtown Brighton at Speakeasy, and working, having awesome people like Grant and Johnny in the studio, kicking out and really editing this stuff. And, but my goal is really focused and aligned this year to get this out and grow this podcast into being one of the top podcasts for small businesses and for entrepreneurs. So I've got so many loyal listeners out there. Let somebody know if this is somebody else, that if you know somebody else as a business owner or an entrepreneur, somebody that's in sales, and they could use some motivation, they could use hearing people's experiences and the tips and the strategies and the philosophies that we have. Like really, it's the stories, and there's so much data. Stories are data with soul, everybody. And so there's so much that you're going to get out of the stories from these entrepreneurs. They're going to take you and your business to the next level. Share it with more people. Let's get this thing going. I'm ready to get on fire. So with that said, Jon Loduca, founder of Playbook Builder, and I'm super excited to have you in the studio, like I said. And man,
it's awesome we get to pick up this conversation, because the last time we spoke, it just felt like, yeah, we kind of come out of a similar heritage or mindset, at least, about what's for sale with small business, and see some of the same obstacles. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you've been on my list, and it's like one of those things of like, will he travel a couple hours to come out? And so I kind of like threw it out there jokingly on LinkedIn, and you're like, let's do it. And so it's like, all right, I'm just going to throw it out, you know?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Let's come out.
It's really cool. So what's on your mind today?
Man, so like, how did you get here? Like, tell me, like, you have a super awesome company that I've talked about and have brought and had conversation with a few of my clients on taking companies to that next level as far as training, and also just like content, and really taking their brand and becoming the expert.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about that, but how did you get there? How did you get to where you are now?
Okay, that's a great start. And it's a funny story. I kind of fell into a really neat opportunity. West Coast kid, grew up in San Diego, went up to the Silicon Valley, and I started a .com in 93. And I didn't even know I was an entrepreneur. People weren't calling themselves that back then. Yeah. I just sort of was up there, and you kind of pick it up as you're kind of around folks. I got a job working for, I think it was actually, it ended up being like the precursor to Grubhub. And I had no idea. They were just a little startup. It was called 911. And I just got a gig there, and I learned how to write code, and I saw an opportunity, and I jumped ship, and I built this business. So I just want to give you the spoiler alert. I made absolutely no money on this, but I was like straight and single and living in San Francisco. And it was just a great opportunity to meet girls and goof off. So we built a restaurant, club, cafe, and bar listing platform for the city of San Francisco. So there wasn't anything like that. I mean, it's 93.
Yeah.
And so, I remember like Yahoo was running television ads. Like it was that long ago.
Yeah.
Just nuts. And,
that was before like a big internet boom.
Oh yeah.
Here at 93,
it was just kind of like, we're learning like the basics, but it was the platform that you probably have seen where you're like selling ads. Restaurants and clubs are like looking for, priority real estate on this platform. So we had content on there doing reviews and things like that. It was the best. I mean, we ate and drank for free in the city of San Francisco. We had Sky Vodka as a sponsor, and we just had a ball, right? And this was a life lesson. While we were busy just kind of figuring it out, waving our flag, hey, we're here, and we're trying to do this. Some big kids came and took our lunch money.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's the great lesson. It's like, if you have a shitty idea,
nobody's paying attention.
Take as much time as you'd like. Yeah, but I wasn't thinking, oh, this is a big deal. and it's the Silicon Valley. We can go raise a bunch of money or something like that. We were just proof of concepting this thing. And while we were goofing off doing that, somebody went, that's a really good idea. And they literally took it from us, and they had all the, business acumen and resources to just wipe us off the face of the earth. And we got, I think we sold it for like a case of beer, and that was the end of it. But it left scar tissue and dramatically informs the business that I have today. Went out to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which sounds ridiculous, but I went to a .com in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we nailed it. It was a few years later, it was 96. Okay. And it was like card table, it's just a kid. Yeah. I'm like this junior guy on this team with all these grown up people. And 2 years later, we sold it for $250 million. Check free bought us.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was so incredible. It was such an incredible culture. So, I was employee number 11. We went to 140 or something like that in 2 years. Dev was in Canada. We were in the US. Everybody scattered all over the place. And, this was early, right? There was no Zoom. It wasn't like we were getting on Zoom calls to stay together, but people were doing conference lines and stuff like that. And somehow or another, the leadership in this organization kept the culture, the values, and the wisdom as kind of swirling as we were growing. So we were all united. It was so interesting. It was like the Death Star. Like somebody would join that company. I remember this guy from like Yale or something. Yeah. He was a really highly pedigreed professional, but he couldn't run with us. The culture was such that it like self-managed, and this guy got kicked out. He just elected to leave because he just didn't want to do and didn't want to be in the way that we were Midwest values company. And Check Free purchased us. It kind of went corporate. It was sort of lame. Everybody vested. I got married and we moved to Chicago. My wife was a Lansing gal and never left the city of, the state of Michigan. So she was like, I'm getting out. And I was like, well, I'm coming with. So off we went to Chicago to start our lives. And it was a really neat opportunity. I had Napoleon Hill's career. So I built an intellectual capital development firm. Okay. Which doesn't mean anything, right? What does that mean? It was this idea, this hypothesis that I had that wisdom, the intellectual property inside of a company is its greatest asset and its competitive advantage. You burn the building down, but if you took those people and set them up someplace else and said, you got to run a shoe store, they'd still kick ass for the same reasons. And so I started to kind of work this idea out as a hypothesis that wisdom is this asset. And so I built a business interviewing some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs and helping them deconstruct how their values inform their choice making to turn what they knew how to do into a process so they could scale it.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
Wow.
Just the coolest. I got to just sit at the feet of these amazing people. I wasn't smart enough to be the consultant who's like, let me tell you how to do this. These are like 30-year industry veterans, bangers, top 250% income earners, US, UK, Canada, like absolute killers. And I wasn't going to teach them jack, and they knew it. But because I wasn't there to do that, they just let me right in. They told me anything I'd ask them. And so I just basically built a career on being dumb. Like that was my professional handle. I was like, I'm just going to ask you the dumbest flipping questions. And you're going to be like, I don't know. Nobody's asked me that in 20 years. But it was actually kind of genius because what they needed was to be able to mentor juniors. And when you run around with people who are really sophisticated and everybody in the room's got 20 or 30 years, you use shorthand.
Yeah.
You talk to me and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Yep.
And right out of the chute, I got this phenomenal client. His name was Jon Loduca. And Loduca was running the Northeast Territory for Lincoln Financial. Okay. And I didn't even own an insurance policy. So I was just fantastically helpful for him, right? Because I just was like, what's insurance? It's perfect. We built the practice management consulting platform for Jon, and then it was successful because Jon was really smart. And Jon was tapped to run all of Lincoln, the whole country. And we were like overnight total killers in the wealth management and insurance industry. I've worked with top 10 producers on every single platform, spoken at all the industry things, MDRT. I did a TED talk. Like this, like world just suddenly opened up, and these guys were kind of passing my name around, and I was just steeped in it one after the other. And strategic coach Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
God bless Dan and Babs. They made my little team the go-to for all strategic coach clients to do process work. So over like a 20-year period, we work with like 500 of Dan and Bab's clients, and you know the caliber. So you know who's coming in those doors. I mean, these are like outstanding entrepreneurs. We worked with the Zigglers. We worked with amazing.
Wow.
And again, I'm not in there like, I'm going to teach you stuff. I was in there just to go, you win and you don't know why. This proved to be true. This wisdom idea was fascinating. It was like, you've got entrepreneurs who have been doing it for so long. They've normalized their genius.
Yeah.
And you ask them and they're like, I don't know. I mean, it's no big deal. I mean, I didn't finish college. Like, this is how you do it. and they don't even relate to us mortals. Like, they just don't even know the delta, the gap between what they understand and almost like pre-synapse, like just like on instinct level, know how to zig and zag. But they got a problem.
Yeah.
And that is that, they're lashed to the business, if that's the case. So everybody that's watching or listening, you've been there. Like, being the smartest guy in the room sounds like a cool situation to be in, but it isn't.
It is not.
It means you are the bottleneck. It means you don't get to go on vacation without your cell phone. It means there's no liquidity event. There's nothing to sell, because if you're not there, boop, nothing happens. Well,
you retire, you die, the company's dead.
That's exactly right. And it's a huge liability, especially because teams are fragmented now. And so information isn't even coalescing inside of a single building. It's all over the place. So it's hard to keep a team unified. And so I'm sort of embarrassed to admit this, like, oh yeah, I did technology. I ran around writing shit down on a pad of paper for like 6 years, going, oh yeah. And I'd write it down. Say that again. And I was like, oh my God, we should film them. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, of course we should film them. And so that's how Playbook Builder was born. Playbook Builder took the how and the why and married it together on this virtual platform. So you could take an entire workflow, an SOP or a process, and you could actually add the video and the external assets to support it so you could come to life. So it'd be like being virtually mentored by the guy who's the founder.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that from a recruiting standpoint? I'm going to work with the founder? Of course not. The guy's on vacation most of the time. He's golfing now. He's 75 years old. But you could spend as much time with his videos as you want to.
Yep.
In your underwear in the basement.
Yep.
100% of the time, over and over and over again. If you'd like to emulate the inflection and the nuances of the way he communicates. And for highly commoditized businesses, they don't differentiate on much. It's not like, oh, we're so much better because our price is so much lower. No, we're so much better because our product is so different. No, it's all in the unique experience.
Yep.
Which is all in the magic. How do you bottle that? Well, you ask the guy who runs the place, you shake him around like a pop bottle and stuff comes out. He doesn't even know sometimes how good it is.
Yep.
And we started running the cameras. We were like, holy shit, we got that right. That was the feeling. It was like, oh, I just tricked him. So we were talking about this earlier because, I'm sitting here, I'm not on podcasts very often. And we were talking about the idea that, like, how do you get people to talk and to say things? And what we found out was I would just provoke them.
Yeah.
I just piss them off. I just get them antagonized enough that they'd forget the cameras are running and they'd just be like, no, of course we wouldn't do it like that, you idiot. No, this is how we do it. And all of a sudden it would come right out of them, or they'd start role playing.
Oh, man.
And that's what Playbook Builder became.
I love that genius moment when they say it out loud.
and you're like,
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes they haven't said that stuff in 20 years. I remember getting somebody on the phone or not on the phone, in front of the camera, and we were interviewing. It was the dumbest thing. It was talking about why you smile on the phone or some damn thing. Well, you always answer the phone with a smile. And he was going on a rant. And all of a sudden the story became about, like, that winter in 1969 when his mom had cancer and he had to pull the sled with the newspapers in the snow. Like, it's real.
Wow. Yeah.
We have stories as entrepreneurs. We have scar tissue, and there's a why behind everything. We just, at a point, you kind of forget, you kind of normalize it. And then you're dealing with some, no offense to millennials or anybody younger. It's just like, sometimes, the generations, it's like we become funky, crusty old people. And you're like, how did that happen? Here's this young person who wants to be emulate or be mentored. And it's like, oh God, why don't you know this? It's like, well, because they haven't spent 30 years in the saddle. How do you shorten that? How do you make that more embracing? How do you welcome that young person in? And better than just dumping into their heads. I really love this idea. We concocted this idea that the top-down organizational model of the 20th and 19th centuries, Football, essentially. Quarterback calls the plays. You're a good soldier. Do your job. This is what you do. Go, do it. Now we got people asking why. And they want to participate.
Yeah.
And instead, we're like, no, just shut up and do your job. And actually, you're missing out on gathering all that IP because these people bring experience sometimes, or they have fresh eyes like I did for my whole career, where I would ask dumb questions and sometimes bump into a good idea. And so it's like this missed, thing. If you're the quarterback and the offensive line just have to run the plays, sometimes they have a good idea, but in the middle of the game, you don't listen. Basketball is a better platform to discuss what happens in a business where everybody touches the ball, play unfolds dynamically. Everybody gets to kind of improvise a little bit, like jazz is kind of like that.
You're talking about what each other saw, what you see.
And that's where innovation comes in. It's spontaneous and it's in those moments. And that's the competitive advantage. We don't look at it like that still. My generation certainly is still stuck in this idea of like, I know what's best. My job is to make you do it. And there's some truth in that to an extent. There's a hybrid model that's basically like, learn how to do it my way and then innovate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so I've had this absolutely ludicrously fun career being exposed to like insanely smart and successful people in industries that I have absolutely no context, no experience in. And of course, the consultant has this unfair advantage, right? You're like a honeybee going from flower to flower, picking up pollen, and you're like, wow. The guy with the plumbing business has the same problem as the, estate planner. It's just a magnitude of scale, or it's just you change the little bit of the inflection of language, and it's the same issue. And you start to see themes, and man, it's been a blast. And we're having a really good time with Playbook Builder. It's sort of caught fire, and we're like a 10-year-old success story. We had the software for a while. I liked it. I think a handful of my clients liked it. We took it to market and kind of got our hands slapped. Just, I don't know, market timing is everything, right?
Yeah.
You have a good idea and it's the wrong time and you're not going to get anywhere with it. And we just kept trying to it's like trying to get on the highway when you're just too much traffic. Like we just couldn't seem to merge on the highway. And it was like 2018 when it felt like things were really changing. And then of course, COVID just made what we do so valuable for us. And we were just talking about this, like, I don't really like the expression. It seems like exploitative capitalism, although I'm a raving capitalist and, have done my own exploiting, I suppose, but that never squander a crisis line.
Yeah.
To an extent, like we just saw people struggling, like all of a sudden their teams are working from home and everyone's disconnected and fragmented. And we thought, oh my gosh, we can really serve them. That was kind of that opportunity to go, we're going to race up and fill this gap. And boy, did it ever work. Yeah. So there's my long tail. And now, that's the backstory. I don't know if you even knew half of that stuff, but that's why we get along is I've kind of danced adjacent to your world.
Yeah.
Talking to sales guys who are like, what the hell? How are you this good at this? You got the same set of tools in your belt as the guy across the street, but you're making an extra zero. What are you doing? I don't know.
What would you find was most common that they were doing? The successful ones versus the...
Well, really successful people I found were fastidious. Unwittingly or unconsciously, they just followed patterns of behavior. They just kind of look for patterns or they would drop into patterns. And so I always sit in this chair. They just have their things that they do habitually and they kind of build off of those. The other thing is, when you're an entrepreneur and you're accountable for making your own income, it's kind of like Darwin. Remember how Darwin talks about evolution as mutation?
Yeah. Yep.
If you're an entrepreneur and you're hungry, you go through a lot of iterations. You go through a lot of trial and error. That's mutation. So you evolve really freaking fast. So I'd meet these guys, 30 years on in their career and be like, their industry would be like a tree. And like, they started out in the trunk of the tree with everybody else. But 30 years later, the accumulation of their choices, I'd meet them way the hell out on some crazy branch where they're making 8 figures. Yep. And the way that they can figure out what happened is to look backwards.
Yeah. Yep.
They just got like, how did I, what are all the intersections where kind of I zigged and everybody else zagged? And a lot of it was, I did a TED Talk several years ago. And it was kind of humbling because, if you have a TED Talk, like you're screwed if you don't like it. Like you better freaking like your TED Talk because that thing's
out there forever.
Fuck, man, it's like an albatross around your neck. And I was really like, okay, I've been exposed to all this incredible wisdom, and I am, the recipient of so much grace because of these incredible entrepreneurs just being so kind and generous and mentoring and just letting me into their world and stuff. And I owe it to them to really honor what I picked up and to aggregate and kind of make heads or tails out of it. So I really worked hard to go, what did I learn? I'd done my own 20 years, primarily helping other people come to grips with what they knew. And so I kind of owed it to them to go, what did I learn? And the things that I saw pattern-wise, the really successful ones, insanely authentic. Mm-hmm. They'd get to a place where they would fly their freak flag and stop trying to game the system by being what they thought the market wanted to be. Yeah, man, they dropped the thing. We were talking about this earlier where it's like, you kind of have to give yourself permission. Like, you got this. It's time for you to just roll. Like, whatever your thing is, you're there. You're probably more ready than you realize. And, it's funny. I'm going to sound like a sexist, but most of the women I encounter as entrepreneurs are so much more ready than they give themselves credit for. Mm-hmm. And most of the men are so much less ready
than they think they are.
Yeah, unfortunately. Like they're out there way on the edge and they're like, yeah, I got this. And it's like, actually, you don't. Whereas I meet women and I'm like, holy crap. I mean, you have a PhD in this and you've been doing it for a long time. Like, cut the ropes. It's time. You're so ready to rock.
Yes.
Like, go girl.
Yeah.
You totally have this.
Yeah.
And so giving yourself permission, I think is critical, and being really authentic in that. It's kind of like a dog whistle for people. I think that we're increasingly becoming attentive to authenticity. Gary Vee, we talked about Gary Vee and like this explosion of social media and all this content. Like, you get a really good nose for bullshit.
You sure do.
Like, you really start to go, that smells like the person saying the right thing or what they're supposed to say or how they're supposed to behave. And we're always interested in these like casual videos where the person's just walking in their neighborhood because we want to know, like, what's this dude really like?
Yeah.
So authenticity is kind of that like commerce or currency, it's a trust factor. And I think that that's signal of success. I think it is a currency of trust. I think it's how we establish it. The second thing, empathy, radical empathy, like having an enormous heart for the people you serve.
Yeah.
And not breaking the rule of, I learned about who they were like 20 years ago because I had a consultant come in and help me figure out who I work with best. And then I just ran that play for the next 30 years. I saw entrepreneurs do that all the time. They started out, my God, they would walk to a prospect's house. And then they figured out the fact pattern and they just start dialing that stuff in. And pretty soon it backs up on them that the Who Moved My Cheese book, like that's totally going on and it's moving at a faster pace. So an extraordinary heart for the people that you serve and an understanding of what is really, really going on with them and how to, any question of messaging, positioning, any kind of value creation with your product. It's not because it was a good idea. It's because somebody will buy it.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about, this isn't art. It's commerce.
Yeah.
Like value creation. I love Dan Sullivan dearly. And one of the things he says is value is inherently subjective. Like, oh my God. Yeah, that's so smart. It doesn't live with my opinion. Who the hell am I? Like, it doesn't matter what I think.
Yeah.
It only matters if somebody else thinks.
You're talking about like Playbook Builder. You loved it at the beginning and then.
Yeah, nobody cared.
Yeah.
I'm in love with my own baby. Like, but somebody should have been like, dude, your baby's ugly.
Yeah.
Like it's not there yet, you know? And I think in many ways we miss the mark because we do fall in love with our products and we got to stay connected to the people that consume them. And real trust, that authenticity is a gateway to get people to tell you, I think, where things are missing the mark. Mm-hmm. It's the greatest form of a compliment is when a prospect or a client tells you missed the mark. I mean, that's incredible. But I think it's fear and scarcity. We kind of hide a little bit, we think we get it dialed in and then we don't really want to hear it anymore because maybe I'm not right. And what am I going to do then? And it's like, it's a dance. You're dancing with a partner. That's business. If you're out of step, it looks awkward and you miss the mark. And so you've got to really kind of tune in and be present. That's a lot of what, I saw where my entrepreneur clients who are really good at this empathy trick, they were sort of like monastic about it, like ritualized about it. That fastidious behavior, it was to put them in the zone.
Yep.
So they could really be present. not miss things, not, because it's easy when you're young because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're really listening. It might be for the first time.
Yeah.
But when you've heard it like for the 50,000th time, it's really easy to go, you don't even need to finish your sentence, bro.
I already know it.
I know where you're going. Like, that's such a trap.
It is.
And I mean, I'm 51. Like, it's so easy to just be a douche, like just to fall right into commoditizing another person.
Yep.
Totally missing their uniqueness, not feeling the situation with them and rolling over them with the solution because you want to help so bad. Like, it's such an easy trap.
It's 90% of what sales is out there. And that's why it's why it's got such a bad name.
Yeah.
I ask so many people when I go out and speak to groups and stuff like that. It's one of my opening things is, what do you think about sales? What are some words that come to your mind? And it's never positive. Very, very rarely do you hear someone say, it's serving at the highest level.
Right.
No, it's like slimy, it's slick, it's fast talking, it's greedy. It's like, it's all these negative things because people are coming at it from the connotation of like me. I've got to sell this thing, or my product is the best, or I've got to fit this. You've got to have this.
Hammer it.
Versus that, being curious and like even what you were doing with all these entrepreneurs, just sitting back and asking dumb questions, right?
Yeah. I think you're right on the mark, and it's a vulnerability to say yes to that.
Yeah.
To not be the answer, but to be the question. And ironically, I found it was safe. I could hide inside of questions if I was insecure about not having answers. It's so funny because like now I'm 51 and I'd hire a 35-year-old kid and I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Stop pretending like you do.
Right.
Like just be completely authentic with me. That I respect.
Right.
Like, dude, I don't know what you do and I'm just going to ask you stupid questions. I'm like, all right.
Yep.
But so I was disarming to them because they were like, all right, you're not too bad. You're stupid.
You're stupid.
Yeah. So I saw that. I saw that incredible authenticity, which is sort of a freedom to give yourself. And what you end up doing is you sort of fly your flag. It's an abundance mindset, basically. It's like, you know what? You don't like it. Totally okay with me. No one's forcing you.
Yeah.
I'm focusing on these people and I'm trying to serve in this way. And this is the truth of who I am. And if that's not a fit for you, that's super okay.
Yep.
So I think people get kind of out. That's a scarcity mindset, is to be like, I know what I'll do. I'll be whatever the market wants me to be. And then you wake up one day and you hate yourself. The market is like, you're invisible. You're like Mr. Vanilla Man. Like you mean nothing to anyone. And ultimately I think you lose your way that way big time as a person. The empathetic thing, I think, is just a good way to go through life. And it's, you said it, and I really appreciate that you said it. It's like, such a gift to be given the opportunity to work with somebody. Like, I understand the agenda. I know what it's like to say, I don't make the mortgage if I don't close this.
Yeah.
Like, I know that world. Yeah. I grew up, as a sales guy and then into entrepreneurism, which is essentially the same thing, but you have to make payroll, right?
All that stuff exists, right?
All that stuff exists.
We know that stuff is out there, but it's like wanting to be in a relationship, right? Like, like,
what do you mean?
So like dating, if I'm going into this, like, I really want a girlfriend or I really want to have sex, whatever it is, like, I'm so focused on, I'm trying to sell me.
The stink of scarcity is on you.
The stink of scarcity is on me, right? Versus that, like,
self-possessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know your value.
Know your value.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think that, the weird trick, and I think it gets easier the more successful you get. It's really hard when your batting average is really shitty.
Yeah.
And you're kind of getting hungry and scared.
Yep.
And when you're winning, it's easy to compound those results too. It's like a vicious or virtuous cycle. Yeah. It's a lot of grace is extended to the guy who's sucking, because it's hard. And
it's hard. It's hard.
Man,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like when you get into a slump or something and you say and do things that you wish you didn't. Yeah.
Well, you look at coaches and consultants, and it's so hard. And that's how I got into coaching coaches and consultants, is because I'd meet with these people that were just brilliant, right? I know, like, you're a better coach than I am. Like, you're classically trained. You have all these, all these accreditations. You ask all these great questions, all these things, right? But they're struggling. They're struggling. It's the imposter syndrome. It's like being heart-centered and wanting to help everybody, not understanding how to position your stories. We talked about this before. It's like those stories. How do you position that and tell people and bring people into where they want to know more, or you attract people in from a marketing standpoint?
When you do this with Roar, what's the degree to which that story crosses into intimate and personal? Is there any?
It's all intimate and personal.
Yeah, tell me.
All it's like if I have a session and my client doesn't cry, there's probably something like we probably didn't reach each other. You know, we probably didn't reach a point, right? Like
I agree.
We're like, because all those emotions, even like the head trash and the reasons why you can't make the calls or you can't feel like you can charge this, you know, if you get nervous around the pricing and you can't charge this price or, you know, selling in general, it's all emotional. It's all deep seated. When I started in sales, I had this fear of making phone calls as I dove in over years of doing the work on myself and doing personal development and understanding myself. I understood that, like, I remember going back as a kid, being at my grandma's house and like telemarketers calling and my grandma like telling these telemarketers off. Right. And then to get out the phone and like, we'd all have a laugh at the expense of this poor salesperson that she destroyed their soul. And then when I think I called her. You probably called her.
I was in college and I sold frozen meat over the phone. So if anybody gives me any shit, I'm like, dude, I sold meat on the phone at dinner time. Like, don't give me any grief. I've done the worst job. I think it's like the 7th ring of hell. And you get to sell meat. They bonus me in pork chops. What happens when you win? You get frozen meat.
You get frozen meat.
Yeah. So how did you get through being afraid of doing cold calls? What exactly was the work you did?
Well, one is doing the work and like understanding the reason why I feel this way is because I'm putting myself in the shoes of like, I'm bugging somebody or I'm bugging my grandma or I'm bugging a person like myself. Right. Yeah. So what is it that I'm actually doing? I had to like feel like I'm serving somebody. Yes. How am I serving somebody?
Yes.
Like, and then so I had to go through a whole process. And the biggest sale you can make in your whole entire career is to yourself.
100%.
You're your first biggest customer.
That's right.
And when you can understand and see that you're serving people, and that if I'd call people and like if they didn't want to talk to me, like that was their loss. Like they're not gonna understand their account and they're gonna have these problems, right? And so like when they would go to hang up on me, it's like, great, you know, but these other people, and it was like I'd have a rebuttal to it, and they'd be like, "Oh, wait a minute," because I was sold. I was sold that I was serving them.
Yeah, I think that's the. It's so funny, man. Talking to you, it's just a crack up. So I had this whole thing called the 5 sales.
Yeah,
the first sale is between your ears.
Yep.
Because if you think you're a fraud and you don't think it's worth it,
you're a fraud.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool.
One of the things I love doing is kind of like what you're talking about is like when sitting down with a customer or sitting down with clients and like, tell me what's the story of working with one of your favorite clients.
Yeah.
And like they just started telling me the story, right?
And you just see them.
And you just see
genius
them.
In them.
But there's so much I talked about at the beginning. There's so much data in the story, so much data in that, you know, a story is data with soul. So as they're telling me that story, it's like, where'd you meet them at? How'd you find them? When you met them, what were their problems? What were they struggling with? What, you know, and when you're going through the process, what were some of their objections? Like, what kind of pushback did they give you? And then how were you able to overcome those objections? And then when you started working with them, what were the results? What's happened over this course of period of time that's made them your favorite client?
Listen to you want a job?
Right? And so they're giving me all this information.
Awesome. It's exactly the deal.
That's the sales process.
It is, but it's also like you get it on camera and it's a playbook.
It's a playbook.
And then I'm the junior going, oh, that's how they do it. And what I found with salespeople, as I'm sure you have too, is because they get so excited, they role play.
Yeah.
Right in front of you.
Yeah.
You're like, holy crap, they just gave me a script. This is what I say. And so they say this and I say this and then they say this and I'm like, no. And you're like, holy crap, this guy's like in the moment. But that's it.
Yep.
I love that you do that. So you rescued yourself because you recognized the merit and the worth of what you were doing for folks.
Yeah. Well, and I had mentors and I got introduced to books and personal development. So,
but it was that was a big switch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was like you're serving.
I'm serving.
Like I'm not taking, I'm giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got into sales because there was something about me that I was, you know, people would do my work, people would give me things and I just needed to make more money. And so I got into sales because I'm like, I'll make commission sales and I make more money.
Yeah.
And then I sucked because I was being taught like all the slimy sales ways, right? Mm-hmm. It took me a while to understand, and going back to before we were on recording, like my gift is being curious, asking questions, like diving in and like and you hit this on the head with like our pass or line. Like when I was young, I didn't want people asking me questions. I was like nervous, like, you know, I didn't want them turning it around on me. So I got really good at deflecting, you know?
Yeah.
I was working with my salespeople the other day. I'm like, you ask questions on questions. Somebody asks you like, what kind of services do you provide? That's a fantastic question. What kind of problems are you having in your company? You know, like, and then stop and let them talk. You turn that question around because like, I can't, you know, and if they ask me, like, you just answer that question with a question, I know because I can't help you until I understand what your problem is.
So I was telling somebody yesterday, you'll laugh at this. I had created a sales process for myself, and I'm way too ADD to follow it. So I had to like make it all written out and laminate it, keep it by the phone, because otherwise I'd get all squirrely, caught up in the moment. And somebody would call up and they'd be like, "So John, tell us about what you do." And like a jackass, I'd take the bait, and 5 minutes later I'd come up for air, maybe 5. That's generous.
Yeah.
And I started going, "Absolutely. Tell me about you and your business." And son of a bitch, every single time they'd tell me everything.
Yep.
And the more I shut up, held my space, and just listened, or threw them like "and what else" kind of a question.
Tell me more.
It's the damnedest thing. They'd be like, "I really like you." Like, "Hey, I win because I didn't say anything stupid that one." Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but I really like being around you, John.
I know. Isn't that funny? Yes.
I've had that told me so many times.
That's
like,
it.
it's just, and I didn't say anything about myself.
But you were getting at it, and I totally agree. Like, the more they talk, you just start collecting. It'd be like playing poker, and you just keep giving me cards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You just told me all of the things I need to tell you that you need to have happen so that you'll buy this from me. You don't even know that you did that, but you just gave me it all."
Everything.
And it's not like a trick. It's not to be exploitative. I mean, if I couldn't help somebody, I would say so. But God, we talk a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
Like doing a podcast with salespeople has got to be the easiest job. Like, you're so lazy. Like, you get somebody like me who's like, "Oh, can I talk about myself a little bit more?"
And I'm like, yeah,
go ahead. Oh, cool.
But you're dropping genius, right? All I have to do is sit here and say, "Tell me more," or
Well,
like,
I
shake
get
my
it.
head.
I totally get it. But yeah, you do this with other people, and they kind of quietly resent it.
Yeah.
Especially because I was a young guy. You know, I think they kind of expected me to just be like full of hot air and self-importance. You know, because
that's the way the industry is.
it's kind of encouraged.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a way of hiding. You know, we're sort of taught like, hide behind this presentation that you got your act together. And the most disarming thing, you know, I discovered was they already knew I didn't have my act together. If I just said, you know more about this than I do, but just another bone to throw to Dan Sullivan, which is deserved. I made a whole bunch of money, millions of dollars, asking people what he calls the R factor question. And if you want to look into that, go look into that. Dan's kind of a genius. I think he really is a genius. Yeah. And that question is designed explicitly to just get people to share. And it's brilliant. And I can't teach it. I'm not going to. But but
I'm intrigued.
It is unbelievable. So, you know, he's all over the internet, and Dan runs a coaching company for really successful entrepreneurs. And that in particular, that tool is aligned with what we're talking about. It's stop telling and start listening.
Yep.
And when you do, the trust goes up, but you're also armed with how to navigate the conversation. Yeah. And there's intimacy and trust and relationship when someone shares, especially because, you know, when we ask each other like, "So how's it going?" And you go, "Hey, everything's fine." And we move on. You miss the opportunity. If you go, "No, really, what's going on?" And they go, "You know, I'm doing okay." Come on, Jason, what's going on?
What's going on?
And all of a sudden, you know, and it's like, hey, we're now really friends.
You're now really
we've transitioned from transactional to, you know, really connected. That's that empathy thing is like, I think it's really hard if you just don't care about people.
It's very hard to do sales or leadership
or anything
if you don't care about people.
I think anything.
Period.
I think
You're right.
It's easy to be tucked away inside of a company as an employee and away from it. When we're frontlines people, you know, you got to love people. But if you're a part of a team creating a product and you don't love people, you know that's going to fail. I mean, that's why they do focus groups. They try to get you in there, and they do everything they can so that you've got some access to the end user because we get, you know, we eat our own crap. We constantly, you know, what's that confirmation bias? You know, we just kind of believe because we think we see it that way. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a challenging thing. The last one is, and I'm just going to round it out, is the third thing, because I think it's so cool, is humble irreverence. See, I work with so many people that, you know, have rules. And it's like, wait a minute. If being really authentic is so important, and being empathetic and like really having a heart for the client is so critical, then you've got to break rules that prevent any barriers that might, you know, that might harm that ability to connect and create value. Yeah. Well, I was told, you know, you never cry, you know, with someone. Yeah. Or we don't talk politics, or you don't negotiate on price, or, I mean, a million things. I've seen all kinds of rules being broken in the most subtle boring things like, oh, when somebody comes into my office, we don't sit adversarially like this. I usually sit next to them.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the world together. And so I kind of symbolize that by just actually sitting next to them on the same side of the table.
Cool.
Why would I, like these are little rules of, oh, I have to be dominant. No, you don't. These subtle things that we bake into, I don't know where it comes from. Watching Mad Men, I have no idea. Like, where do you come up with this crap? But we've inherited certain rules, and they're not always compatible with our hearts and our heads, kind of leading us to make better decisions as entrepreneurs. And sometimes you just have to, I'm not talking about breaking the law here. I'm not talking about, causing harm in any regard. I mean, the things that stand in the way from really caring for people heroically.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. I hate to say this because it sounds trivial, but once you kind of get into your mindset where you could drive to somebody's house to help them, it kind of gets easy. I hate to say that, but like anybody who owns a business, you install kitchens, you're a financial advisor, you're a coach or a consultant. Like once you get into the mindset of like the person opposite you really matters as a human, like just a sovereign little being, you kind of know what to do, unless I guess there's a possibility you'd just be such an imbecile. But if you're called to serve, getting your own shit out of the way and opening yourself up to be, a channel for serving that person is all just about listening stuff. While I sit here and talk at you.
Yeah. No, it's true.
I'm just like, blah, 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 Yeah.
It's true. And, and people are always dropping clues. And if you're aware to it, and it's not always just about how can I make money? It's like, how can I help and serve somebody, and then like, and how does that come back around? We talk about like referrals and building relationships. Sure. Like, because at the end of the day, paying bills does matter. And like all that stuff does have to happen, right? You do things with your heart, but like, I have a relationship, and you might even know Kelly Horton.
Oh, I love Kelly. Yeah,
Kelly,
she's awesome.
It's phenomenal. And so she helped me hire a couple salespeople for a client.
Did she? Fantastic.
And so a few weeks later, after she got me set up with that, she came back around and she was like, "Hey, I need to pick your brain on some sales stuff."
Cool.
And so we sit down, we had a conversation as she was going through it. She's like, what I need is a salesperson, but I need to find this person. And she started describing who she wants. In the meantime, there's somebody that I had worked with for several years that is out looking for a job.
Isn't that
I'm
cool?
like, hey, you need to meet this person.
Yeah.
I connected them. And then now that's who her salesperson is.
I love that. That's great.
It's just being able to like listen. And when she said,
oh yeah, I met him.
Words,
good dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, isn't that crazy? It's a small world.
Really small world. Yeah. That's wild.
So I've worked with him for 3 years. So, and again, it's that, sitting down, understanding who people are, like meeting people, and, like diving in.
I think in our, in our world today, and I'm going to sound like an old fogey, but AI is a real deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a joke. It's not a sound bite. Like you see Chat GPT and like you go in there and you realize this is coming after the creative class.
Yeah.
This isn't like robotics in some far away, kind of world that we don't really work in. This is taking the job away from a 25-year-old, social media copywriter potentially.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And the only way we're going to compete against that stuff is to be insanely really, really well acquainted with being a human.
Yeah.
A really, really good human.
Yes.
And when you can be the nexus of interactions and connections, either sharing ideas or introducing people, like that kind of gets you through this.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
If your job is to move things from here to here, or they do the equivalent intellectually, you are in a lot of danger. When I did that to this TED Talk was AI and EQ, and it was this idea of emotional intelligence kind of being the last thing,
Yeah.
in this bleak world. And my God, was that a dark chapter. I went right down the rabbit hole. I was kind of hanging out with, wasn't really on a board, but I was kind of an advisor to a guy starting up an AI company. And I went right down the rabbit hole learning about this stuff. And it was flipping bleak because it's real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. It's not like a soundbite. AI passes the deity test. Omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and immortal. Just like Zeus and Apollo and one of the Greek gods. Incredibly strong. It can be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's all knowing and it never dies. This is real.
It's freaky.
It's that.
Because it is so real.
Yep. And the best ideas, that have come out of all of our geniuses out there is a guaranteed basic income, which is going to rip the soul out of our American experiment. You know, this merchant class culture we have of striving entrepreneurs, this middle class who want a better life for themselves and their children. Like, it's heartbreaking to imagine that this stuff's going to come in and sweep out a huge swath of the workforce. And not like, you don't have a job this year. It's more like that job will never
exist again. Yeah.
It's structural unemployment stuff.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And I think that it's kind of like commoditization that's happened in so many industries, except it's just like turning that up. You know, globalization was a threat. Commoditization was a threat. This is a whole other bag of cats. This is a self-learning, you know, I was telling this group, and I was very unpopular that afternoon. I think it was just like, please stop talking. You're freaking me out. And I was like, I mean, imagine the implications. Like, I teach my kid French at the kitchen table, or how to do a quadratic equation. And all of your kids wake up in the morning knowing French or knowing how to do a quadratic equation. Like, when we're talking to Siri takes all that information and goes back to the hub, and then every node is like updated.
Yeah.
Like,
done.
Is done.
Yep.
And I'm trying to pour in all my wisdom into my 2 sons and my daughter.
Yep. And that's a process of years.
Yeah, years. And I'm going to get half of it wrong. They're going to forget it. This one picks up this one picks up this little tidbit, you know, and you know, it's flawed. Not this. This is a species that'll, you know, this is a new life form almost, and it'll transition its genetic code with perfect fidelity.
Yeah.
Generation after generation. So this is going to get smarter and faster at every cycle. Yeah, I could go right down into a very bleak,
I know this is every time I've had
thing.
Conversations about this. It's very bleak. Scary, yeah.
So what do we do? What do we do? You know, we don't cave. We're not going to go live in the woods. You know, what are we going to do? And I think it's this.
Yeah. Yep.
It's, you know, you care about me, I care about you. We're buddies. Yep. We can sit here and talk about really important things. Be real with each other. You know, transact on this level that's entirely human, emotional, irrational. So what? I'm a shitty calculator.
Yeah.
I'm not going to compete there.
Yeah.
But in this place, like we have maybe more time. I don't know. I mean, I'm maybe that's idealistic. You know, somebody who's really steeped in the stuff would say, "Oh, you're cute. Hang on to your little vision." But yeah. I don't know how else to look at it. You know, I think that there's something innately in its spirit, something innately human that's sacred, and that's our domain, and I think we can still occupy it, even though this thing starts to encroach.
When you look at it, it's kind of been the theme of our conversation is that empathy piece, because totally the technology piece doesn't have that.
It doesn't. I mean, what's even weirder is you've got some kid, you know, who's maybe not kid. You've got some genius who's creating an algorithm based on his own biases, and that will now run the AI. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't get approved by you know, because your credit score, or, you know, some kind of behavioral thing that it's assessing, and that's because the person who coded it embedded, either consciously or unconsciously, their own bias.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you like this kind of music, then you're probably a jerk.
Yeah.
And we can take that in any direction you want to take it. Politics, sexuality, where you live, anything, your occupation. Oh, you're a sales guy. Oh, like. Those algorithms are going to have implicit weighting of various characteristics. So it's a human creating them, which is ironic, right?
Yeah, it is.
But once the stuff starts to flourish and self-regulate and self-learn and all this stuff, it'll take on a life of its own. But yeah, it'll be an interesting chapter for us and our children. But I think in many regards, it's this.
Yeah,
it's empathy.
Yep.
It's being a human, being an authentic reflection of your God-given skills, not trying to put on whatever costume seems, you know, like the right one for this week, and doing whatever it takes, breaking any rule that stands in the way, and just serving, just really taking care of other people. I think there's always going to be an economy for that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me like, oh, this is going to shut down, no more technology, like what would you and I do? We look out for our neighbors. We create value that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you would do. You'd still be you.
Yeah.
Different business.
Yep.
I think, you know, but
Well, and it goes back to like what we were talking about earlier.
Same
You
essence.
find the beauty in everything, right? And you know, COVID, like it was one of those things. I panicked at first, being a small business. That,
Of course.
half my clients shut down and let go of me. You know, it was like, oh crap, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But then it was that realization that, you know what, it's buying that time and going out and being as active as possible. It's going out and serving as many people as possible. It's going, you know, and I did that.
Leaders lead.
I got out.
It's the only thing we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like it's the soul. It's a verb.
Yeah.
You lead.
Yep.
That you communicate, connect, create value. Yeah, I love that you did that. And I don't know, you know, not everybody did, and you know that's true. And
Yeah.
it's you know, you kind of wonder how you're going to handle in a crisis,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
You kind of don't
Yeah.
know, like how many pandemics do you think you're going to go through? You know what I mean? Like, of course, we had no game plan for that. And I remember feeling like I felt like a spaceman. Like for like a couple of weeks there, I was just like, oh, because the same thing happened to me. It was like total radio silence.
Yeah.
It was spooky. Everyone was like, yeah, we're not doing anything. We had like,
Nothing.
I don't know, a few $100,000 in work lined up. And it just was like,
Oh.
yeah, I mean, I was like, you know, Gretchen here in the great state of Michigan kind of started locking this crap down. But just
Yeah.
before she did, I was like, all right, I'm going to refinish the bedroom furniture.
Yeah.
I got a taste of being retired.
Yeah.
I was like, it's 10 o'clock. I probably shouldn't be in pajamas. That was March. And that's how I spent March. I was like, I need to stop watching television and Matlock. And
Matlock. Oh man. That's
I
a
need to
throwback.
get dressed. I need to get dressed. Like this isn't okay. Like this is, you know, guardrail. But the people that I saw flourish were just like you.
But how beautiful
Step
was that
right in.
time to take that break? Because like another thing I said out loud was like, we were so busy.
Dude.
But during this time, if not
No
anything, we had
kidding.
time. We might have had money, we might have had toilet paper, but we had time. We had time to be with family. We had time we had no excuse to run out and create the busyness and do the things. And
I think a lot of people were like, what the hell have I been doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people were like, whoa, time. Have I been living like this whole time?
Absolutely.
And in contrast to the pace, I mean, people were taking their kids out of school where they had to, but they realized like, oh, I'm not going back to work.
Yep. I saw, from my standpoint of working with a lot of solopreneurs and people starting businesses, people walking away and leaving. And it was so funny because there's this whole problem of hiring people and people are like, oh, they're taking unemployment. No, they're like creating OnlyFans and like doing TikTok. They're TikTok influencers and they're creating consulting businesses and they found other ways to make money. And they just decided during 2020 that they don't want to deal with any of that crap anymore.
Yep. We started doing, so we had a professional services arm that did Playbook Builder video interviews. And I just found this crackerjack young guy who figured out how to do, I mean, this was super early. See, he was really early.
Yeah.
Figured out how to do really high quality green screen videos for our clients without us showing up in their offices. Ship them a gear and show them how to use it and get them all squared away to shoot really high quality green screen. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to do when you're there. Like you ask any of the guys around here, they know like that stuff can look janky super easy.
Oh yeah.
And this guy was so smart. He figured it all out and had all the technology squared away. And we're shooting videos for people's playbooks, all remote. And I mean, I'd love to say, oh yeah, I thought of that. Of course I did. This was just somebody that when the moment came, it's just, I get it on a level that's sort of like an archetype. Like when it goes down, whatever goes down, wouldn't you like to think that you wouldn't be under your desk clutching your pearls and peeing your pants? Like I would like, I mean, every action movie I've ever seen, I'm like, hell yeah. Of course I would punch that guy in the face. I would jump through the window. Of course I would. And then you go, or maybe I wouldn't because I never have been tested that way. Yeah. And it's fun to see the people that like under that kind of extraordinary, exquisite pressure. Yeah. Innovated and stood up and led and created a lot of value out in the world. It's really a cool test because I haven't seen anything quite like that in my lifetime where there's that much ambiguity and fear. And that's the stuff that shuts most folks down.
It is.
Yeah. We rock. Humans are awesome. We really are.
We have the ability to change.
Not everybody,
quickly, right?
Yeah.
And adapt and change. And
I think it's a mindset, though.
yeah, it is a mindset. Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's all mindset.
As you and I were talking about, I saw a lot of people kind of fat and lazy and kind of rest on their laurels. And
a lot of people scared.
And they got caught unawares and they were just like, huh? What? And it was like months before they did anything about it.
Yep.
Guys like you like a little jet ski, zip, zip, adjust, and you're back into commerce.
Right back into it.
Super cool.
It was one of those things Grant asked a question of one of my guests a few weeks ago beforehand as we were warming up. He was like, if you were on Survivor, do you think you'd win?
Great question.
To me, I think every guest I have on would say yes. That's what I look for. I look for the people that are the survivors, are the difference makers. And so like when you mentioned that of like, you want to know if you have those laurels, like, I see you as one of those people that come out of Survivor.
It's so funny. I wouldn't actually.
No.
I'd be like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Because I would know it was fake. But
yeah.
But
but surviving period and Survivor, the TV show is.
No, I know.
If I dropped you in a jungle, you'd come out riding the lion.
I'd like to think so. But I have to be super honest. I don't really know. I don't really know.
We never know until we're there, right?
No, and it's kind of an interesting way to live. Like we live in this little bubble.
Yeah.
And you turn off the lights and you watch what happens. Give it a week or two and you see people getting nuts. I mean, it's interesting that the fine balance of civilization, it doesn't rest on much. A handful of utilities and some access to food and man alive. Yeah. So COVID, I think, COVID was an interesting psychological experiment on some levels. Like you really got to see people under pressure and how they operate and who innovates out of a problem.
Yeah.
The classic entrepreneur, the big institutions or the large battleship enterprise organizations were like, it's just absurd and tragic just how ridiculously slow they were to respond in so many regards. Just talk about squandered opportunities.
Yeah.
But, reversal of fortune is kind of the American dynamic. Like you just see, whoa, these guys are up and these guys are suddenly down. There's some stat that I can never remember in detail, but it's the number of companies off the Fortune 500 that'll be gone in the next year. I mean, it's just this, until recently it was like, you're US Steel, you're not going anywhere. Now it's like, bloop, 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 bloop. They're just bopping in and out of there because everything is kind of hyper speed.
Well, you listen you read Good to Great, the book, and some of the companies he's talking about that are the
Jim Collins.
The great companies are gone.
I know, and primarily I think it's because that hunter killer instinct, survivor, as you were talking about, it's easily corrupted by comfort.
Mm-hmm. It sure is.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that was fun for me was sitting across the table from some of these successful entrepreneurs and the ones that. You could tell like their best days were 20 years behind them.
Yeah.
But many of them, they were still lions. That's why they were still killing it.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
It is really neat.
I sat across the table from a dude who's like 81 years old. Just a crackerjack mind. He gets up at 4:30 in the morning and he fills auditoriums all over the world. He's a sales trainer.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal. And you see him and you go, there's a 60-year-old guy. He's 80. I think he's 82 now. And it's this funky kind of thing with entrepreneurs. It's like this fulcrum that you have to find this balance between fear and comfort. Too much comfort, you get fat and lazy. Too much fear, you get paralyzed. And that COVID thing was like, this is an interesting test to go like, where are you?
Where are you?
Because if you're like, oh shit, I was on the, I was down in Florida getting a tan, like you got walloped. And if you were like paralyzed with fear, you saw those people too. And those poor people were exploited by that.
Just wiped off the face of the earth.
They were wiped off the face of the earth and they were just put into like they're wrapping themselves in cellophane to go to the grocery store. It's absurd. It's just these people that were kind of like a little hungry, but kind of had enough game to manage the stress of it. It's fascinating. Yeah.
It is fascinating.
Yeah. I don't wish any other social experiments like that.
Well, when it comes down, and we talked a lot about the AI, but when we talked a lot about empathy, and to me, like every great business is created from solving a problem. And so
outstanding. Yes.
And it comes down to that empathy. Like you created Playbook Builder out of like this thing that you were doing and you saw.
I did.
You saw what was happening. You saw the problem, what was happening inside companies. You were able to build this thing that helps companies. And that's where the greatest ideas come from. The greatest
totally agree.
businesses come from is when they're
Absolutely.
actually getting into the psychology of it, of what are they bumping their head against?
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the other factor, which is timing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yep.
And I love Simon Sinek and I love his why.
Yeah.
I think it's such an incredible contribution just to the kind of the canon of business thinking. But I kind of want to write a book on when, because when is really weird and subtle, but it really matters. Like you may have the right idea and you may be all over the why, but if it's not like, we were ready for why.
Yeah.
We were ready for that TED Talk. We were ready for his contribution. But if he'd popped up with that crap like 10 years earlier or whatever, like maybe it would have been crickets. We never would have heard of him.
Yep. Well, 10 years before was YouTube what it was.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
like
That's a
he
good
hit
point.
a really good period of
crest.
time.
Yeah. Market timing is an interesting one.
That
So
10 years, because that probably came out in,
it was a while ago.
it was a while ago. Was it 16, 15,
No.
7?
Nah,
Really?
I wouldn't know.
I don't even know
really-
either. But anyways, you look at 10 years before that. I mean, if it was, let's say it was 2010, you look at 10 years before that, we're looking at Y2K. Like
Seriously.
we're not, people don't have cell phones.
Yeah.
They're not watching
know.
YouTube. They're not listening to podcasts. Like
Flip phone. Yeah.
what he would have said would have never been heard by anybody.
So wild.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. And product market fit, I think, is similarly wired to when.
Yeah.
So it's not just access to the information, because it's a platform that didn't really have game until he kind of caught the wave. But number two is like when the world is ready for an idea, and you could be banging against that glass with the same idea 10 years later. Oh, come on in. We're so glad to see you. It's the damnedest thing. And I think that's an interesting trick. And I don't really like the word luck, because I think it should be a science, but there's a factor of chance.
Yeah.
There really is, I think. You have to be all those things and get lucky with the timing. And what's funny is, you see this all the time where it's like they nail the when. They get lucky and they don't have their shit together. They don't know the client. They don't have a product that really works, and they squander that window. So it's like you try really hard and then you hope you can merge onto the highway. But if you're not in your car, if you're not going 70 miles, you don't even get a chance.
Yeah.
So you just kind of, I think that's the interesting characteristic of a business that does hyper growth is you have to be ready, and then know your line. I had this woman, this is again, one of these great byproducts, all these amazing clients. She was just this little bitty thing, and she had the nicest little voice, and she's just a sweetheart. She sold her semiconductor business for like $300 or $400 million. She's a freaking badass. She had like 2 PhDs, and she was just the nicest lady. And I remember she told me, she said, there's a reason why NFL players, even the defensive linemen, drill, catch the ball, hit the lane. There's a reason for that. It's because when Monday Night Lights, these guys have got muscle memory. They're not going, oh crap, I caught the ball. What do I do? You know what I mean? You can't. You're going to get killed doing it. You've got to be able to know your lane and run. And she likened it to business. And so you don't really get to know when your timing is up. You just have to be flipping ready. And so, it's like all these things we're talking about as a monastic discipline.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you're gonna run your whole business being awesome and connected and all of the great ideas that you've been sharing for so long that I think are heart-based and unleash the person to really tell their story and connect and communicate effectively. But you don't know where you're gonna burst onto the scene.
Yep.
You're kind of you bide your time until you get your big moment. And who knows? Simon Sinek, who's just a guy did a little TED talk with a whiteboard or a flip chart, I wonder how many times he'd done that talk and people were like, meh.
And then it just hit.
Like a nuclear bomb goes off. Yeah. I mean, it's all due. It's a phenomenal contribution, but, I think market timing and those things are the risk factor for entrepreneurism. This is sort of the dice roll aspect of it.
I think you have a phenomenal book that you have a concept for there.
Oh, I do?
Yeah, for the when book.
Yeah, really,
yeah,
I know.
That's solid because you're right. You're like when.
Yeah, well, I kind of stole the idea. I mean, there was a guy who did a TED Talk that, of course, nobody heard of. It was just not nobody. I think it was reasonably popular, but I remember bumping into it and going like, that makes a lot of sense. And he was more of a research guy. He was brilliant and had done this analysis of .coms that did well. And so much of it was predicated on the market timing. And I don't remember exactly how we factored it, but I never lost that idea. And I've been the guy across the table from 500 businesses that were phenomenal and ready to go. And some did and some didn't. And the reasons were not always, oh, this one doesn't want it, or these guys suck. It was like, no, check the list. Hungry, qualified entrepreneur, lots of dry powder, team, product, everything. And this one is 2014 and this one's 2012. Like, I've personally seen it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've even seen, you're not really good enough for this kind of success. I hate to sound like, a snob, but like, I've been like, really?
Yeah.
I have. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, it's wild. It's because I think you and I are in the same sort of business. I'm going to say this, and I bet you'll laugh because you'll feel the same way. Like, I've often felt like I've been a midwife for ideas, like I bring them out and they're like, oh my God, it's beautiful. But then they grow up and I'm like, what happened? Like there's this feeling of, I hope he turned out okay. I'm like there through the labor and there's yelling and we're never doing this again, and it's like, then the thing is beautiful and perfect and an incredible contribution.
Yeah.
And yeah, I check in once in a while because I'm like, whatever happened to little Billy?
Yeah. So you kind of have to check in. Like, you have to check in. Danny is one of the sales guys I work with and his family company, and his, I had him on my podcast a few weeks ago, and I had said, like, what's really cool is, like, I don't know how long I'm gonna be working with you. It's a finite time, but I know, like, when I get to look back 20 years from now and I check in with you, like, you're going to be the reason why the company's successful. Like, you're going to be part of that. And just to be able to see that,
that's really cool.
Like, to be that midwife, right? And like take it through this process and then kind of hand it off and watch it go to the next level.
That's a neat thing you just said, though. That's a different role. And I value it tremendously. Like, to be recognized as a young person by somebody like you, that's a big thing to give someone.
Yeah.
Someone must have done it for you. Somebody did it for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Changed my whole life.
Yep. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for...
Tell me about that. One. Who was it?
The biggest one is a guy named Dean, and I was a manager of a Verizon wireless store out in Lansing, and
he knew you were special.
Yeah. No, he did. He latched on to me right away. He kicked my ass constantly, like, would tell me the things that, invested in me, right?
Yes.
And it's a long story short, but I had gotten a lot of sales success in this location, and it was kind of in my head, like I was cocky about it, but all the little detail things were going away. Like, I was running a retail location, and we're in South Lansing, and this kind of across the street from low income housing, and I had like 5 days of 5, 6, 7 days of cash deposits sitting on hand at any given time because I just wouldn't go make the deposit, or I wouldn't delegate somebody to go make the deposit.
Was it Dean to kind of snap you around about that stuff?
So Dean was constantly pushing me. One day I got an email from the owner of the company, who I never talked to. He was like out running other companies. And so he was with Dean at this event in Las Vegas. And I get an email from this guy who's never said, by the way, great job. Thank you for taking my location and turning it around. I took this location, and it was now a national player. So it was like, it was the worst store in our company. And now it's the best, not only the best store in our company, but the best location, one of the best locations in the country. Wow. So I'm like, what the F, man? Like, you're not. So anyways, I get this email from this guy, and it's like, basically like, why do you work here? Like, why do I still have you as an employee? Like, you're garbage. You have all these deposits. You have all these things that are just falling below. I'm sitting here with Dean right now, and I want to know, like, what can I do to get Dean to do his job better, to get you to do your job? And I'm reading this email, and I'm like, infuriated. Like, I'm at the end of the day, my team's around me. I'm like kind of keeping it to myself, and I'm thinking about the words I'm going to say back to this guy. Right. And so I get home, and I'm about to send out this email, and I wrote down like this whole scathing, like,
sure.
I was about to hit send, and this like voice of reason popped in my head. I was like, Jason, what do you want the results to be here? I was like reading the email, like, okay, I know what's going to happen if I send that email. What do I want to happen? Do I want to quit this job? Do I want to be fired from this job? Do I want to like prove my point? Do I want to leave and go take my talent somewhere else? What do I want to happen? And it's like, the truth is, I want to continue growing. I want to continue growing and being a leader. And if I'm not doing those little things, it doesn't matter how much I'm selling, because I'm not a very good leader if I can't get those little things done to run an operation.
Oh, you went all the way to like hearing his message.
Yeah.
You didn't just stop yourself from writing a stupid email.
I reversed it all the way
You
around.
actually went all the way to, dude's got a point. Maybe I need to make a change.
Major self-discovery for me. It changed my life. Because that day I went from thinking like an employee to thinking like a business owner. I went from, because I was like,
that's a great story.
It doesn't matter how much I'm selling. If I'm not depositing that money in the bank, it doesn't matter. It's not even money that exists, right? And if he didn't deposit my check-in on Friday, what would I do? I'd be so pissed off. Like, and I'm pissed at this guy for sending me an email. Please deposit my money.
That's a lot of maturity to do.
It is right time, right moment. Because if it would have been a couple of years earlier, it probably wouldn't have happened that way. I probably would have shot the email out.
But you were still in a defensive position and you got there. It's pretty cool.
And I got there. So right timing, to our point in the conversation, right? The right timing and my maturity to receive that message and to break it down the way I did and respond the way I did.
Yeah.
And so instead of making excuses or anything else, I took 5,000% ownership. I took out a notebook. I wrote down every single thing that needed to be done in that location, not just the sales that I hung my hat on, but every little thing that needed to be done. I created a map of what needed to be done on a daily basis. I started delegating. I created a whole entire plan. For 4 months, I worked this process of following up. If something didn't get done, I was calling that guy at 8:00 at night. Hey, what's going on? Why didn't that get done? And like, okay, when you get in tomorrow, I'll make sure that's the first thing to get done, and then follow up with them first. And it was like, when I left that company, I had a machine.
It's awesome.
It was just running. I could take vacation in fact, I took a vacation a month before I left and took another company over. And I took that vacation and I came back and the store did better when I was gone. It was like, that's amazing. And I had a report of everything that happened while I was gone. Like I didn't, nothing skipped a beat. And it was like, that was beautiful, but it took that moment. So fast forward, we had this competition like between leaders of the company, and between me and this other guy, we had pretty good numbers. And so Dean was being fair and gave us a competition to who was going to go to Vegas with him for this CTIA event.
Okay.
And what we had to do was create a email or type up basically a persuasive message on what it is why he should take me. What it is that what I'd get out of this, like that whole entire thing. And I basically told him the whole entire story I just told you, in like the metamorphosis of my mindset and what that event would do to me, taking it to another level. And I told him that, the whole story about that email changing my life. And so we're in Vegas because I won, of course. So we're in Vegas.
I love Vegas.
We're in the cab ride to the hotel, and Dean looked at me and he was like, dude, you want to know something funny? I was like, what's that? He was like, I wrote that email to you. I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, Rob was busting my chops. I was in the hotel room. I was like, dude, give me your computer. And I just took his email and I typed you up that email and sent it to you. And Rob had no idea what I sent to you. Like, that wasn't him. That was me.
So you shouldn't have killed his dog. Wow.
Changed my life. And that guy, he invested in me, and even, he set me up with my next role where I was able to become a director of sales. And so it was a really cool situation.
That's a mentor.
It was a mentor.
He knew how to turn your crank.
But then he believed in me, right? And that's all I really needed at that point in my life, was somebody believing in me.
Yeah, that's a transitional thing. I think not to gender base this thing, because it's like probably universal. But I know as a young man, I just didn't know what I was. I didn't know how to be a man yet. I was just kind of bumping around. Oh, that hurt. Touching stoves was sort of my learning curve. And I got recognized like you did. It wasn't quite as dramatic a story. I mean, man, it was a hard one though.
Let's hear it.
All right, I'll tell you my story. So I'm bumping around in the dark. I've started Wisdom Link, which is the consulting company I was telling you about at the very beginning. Before Playbook Builder, I was doing this analog. And a coach at Strategic Coach, it was introduced to me, and it just, I don't know, he just sort of recognized me. And he told me later on, he was like, we recognize each other. Mm-hmm. People, and he was hard charging. Guy was a genius. I mean, a genius. Like, he's a strategic coach. It's pretty demanding. He also was an attorney and had a law practice. He also had a real estate development thing called Derbyshire. He also had the American Pet Cross that he had launched. He also had Advisor Freedom, which was a program, and he wrote a book called 10 Conversations to Have with Your Aging Parent, and he was licensing out this entire program to other financial advisors, and he owned a retirement facility in Charlotte.
Wow.
the dude was a mother. He was like a nuclear bomb. And he told the story of growing up West Virginia poor and really getting an appetite for success. And he's just a fantastic guy. He's like a house on fire, this guy. You know, one of these people who's like, why are you calling me like emailing me at 4:30 in the morning, you know, about something he read in the Torah and saw like a Bruce Lee movie, and he had a thought, you know, like just genius. He sued the IRS at one point and beat them. He was just freaking smart. This guy was amazing. And so I was just honored, you know, and he gave me books and I read them. And that was the beginning of it. Well, we became buddies and I got close to him and you know, I kind of got to see him just as a guy, not as an icon, not as some sort of unreal person. And then he got cancer. And I loved him. And, you know, I really was devastated. He told me, he kind of called me up and he said, so here's the deal, you know, I've got this like stage 4 thing. If I don't have it out, I'll be dead by Valentine's Day. If I do the surgery, I get a 50-50 chance. And so he elected to do the surgery and, he lived past Valentine's Day, but he was dead by the following Christmas Eve. And, he had 2 people speak at his funeral that he asked, Dan Sullivan and me. And the sobering relationship with that is, like, I knew what he meant to me, but sometimes we don't know what we mean to others.
Yeah.
You know, like we don't always know. And it was touching in a deep, deep way. You know, like Dean's out there still. It's pretty special.
Yeah.
That this guy recognized you and then made sure you knew what he wanted for you and kicked your ass. Like that's the kind of love that you get. That's kind of like, you know, grown up kind of care.
It is.
For another young person. Yeah. I think that when you did that, you know, you recognize a young person and you let them know what they're worth like you did. You know, that's, I think sometimes a little encouragement is just the missing piece.
Well, and you called it out really, really quickly because it was something that as soon as I had that moment with Dean and it changed my life, it was one of those things like I wanted to go and give that to as many people as possible.
Else. You better
I wanted to
it.
like give it was like pay it forward,
You
right? How many people
it.
can I pay this forward to? Because for me, you know, I had a shitty dad. I had an abusive dad that killed himself at 40. You know, at 43, and I didn't have that male figure, and so to have that,
so you had to become the hero. You were
become
seeking
the hero, and then I'm working in sales and like. Sales, like the whole like pieces, people that get into sales are all dysfunctional, right? Like from past and scars, and like there's a lot of dysfunction in sales. And so I'm meeting and I'm working with these people that are going through so many dysfunctions. And I'd sit with people and they'd be like, I just feel like you know what I'm going through. And it's like, because I do know what you're going through. I'm in a different position in a role right now where you see me differently, but I was just like you. I was in your shoes. I was going through the evictions. I was going through whatever.
That's the empathy
loss,
piece.
whatever it is.
That just like recognizing the other human being. I don't know if there's anything better than that. It's just to be recognized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just, you know, just being with someone, not fixing it, not even, you know, just being with another person and just bearing witness while they tell you their story or whatever. I mean, it's a really neat way for us to be with each other. What you do, I think, and I really appreciate this about you, when you see something in someone and you tell them, I mean, wouldn't you have just died for a little encouragement?
Oh, yeah.
Me too.
Yep.
You know, like you're just banging into stuff. You know, you're making a jackass out of yourself. You're just hoping nobody notices, you know, kind of keep your head down and try not to make too big of a splash, you know? And, somebody kind of goes, hey, it's transformational. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of moving into being a tribal leader, you know, and I think that's an honor. Yeah. Yeah. I know I'm a dad. And so I get to do this with two boys. Oh. I gave a speech the other day and I said, my favorite John Wayne quote, life is hard. It's harder if you're stupid. And I said, I have teenage boys. So I say that just about every week. And I kind of do because, you know, there's boys and I see like young men, I see like this even more primitive version. It's just like, you're wearing one sock. Like I can't take you seriously right now. Like, get 2 freaking socks on. What are you doing?
How old are they?
Oh, 13 and 15.
Okay. Mine's 14. So right.
Okay. Right there. Where you're just like, you know, like, come on, man. And I also know like when I catch them doing something right and I give them the gift of my eyes, like a lighthouse sweeping over. And I'm like, I see what you just did. And that was awesome. Just what the impact is. Like, we've been talking about being entrepreneurs this whole time, and what we get to do for people is such a gift. And so much of it is so basic.
Yeah.
I spent a whole career telling other grownups, you got what it takes. That's like my job. That was like for 20 years almost, was to dig around in the rat's nest of their brain and go, holy shit, you don't have any excuses, bro. Like, this is amazing stuff you've got under the hood here. Like, let's get this out in the world and just kind of hold the mirror up to people. And it's such a delight to do that, especially when what you see is so good.
Yes.
When you just go like, you're so cool.
Yeah.
You're such a good person and you're so valuable. And I just want you to know. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't know it.
I know. Just dying for a little encouragement. I think it's a tough racket. I mean, everybody says, being an entrepreneur is lonely and stuff like that. And unless you've done it, like, you have no idea how lonely.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's
a thrill of being in charge of your own destiny and making your own decisions and being fully accountable. But there's also just this sense of like, I can't even ask people. If I were to tell people how dumb I am, no one would hire me. Like, I remember feeling like, I can't let them know, like just, and I was really extreme. I remember, just being on the very edges of completely dysfunctional. Like, I haven't opened my own mail since 2007. Like, there's just things that I just can't do. I just delegate. I got this great advice one time. This guy was like, a really, really smart entrepreneur has a really hard time because they can do so many things. It's the dumb ones that actually end up building a team because they just know their limits. And I just thought, oh, that's good advice. I need to know my limits. And I'm not trying to monkey around with this or that, but it is so lonely. It's even you're a sales guy on a team.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, you write your own ticket, you create your own future. You can't monkey around with the product, but nonetheless, you don't get paid because you tried hard. You only get paid because you actually win.
Yep.
Like, it's binary. It's not this mushy, you had a hard week. You still get paid. You sucked, but you were here every day. Like, that's not the world of the sales.
That's not the world of sales or entrepreneurship.
No, it's binary. Like, you figure it out or you go home.
Yeah.
And that's that evolutionary thing I was talking about, where it's like, sometimes people just don't figure it out. And other people are like way over there, exotic on their own little branch, they figured it out 5 times zero.
Over. Yeah.
It's nuts. But
that's where I would argue, and just to close it up, that's where I'd argue is
close it up.
Yeah, to kind of wrap that up is wrap it up. To kind of wrap it up is that entrepreneurship is as lonely as you make it. Life is as lonely as you make it.
Doesn't have to be.
I'm sitting here having a phenomenal conversation with you. You've made your living talking to incredible entrepreneurs that have been through the same jungle, same walk, same jungle as you, right? And so, and I would imagine a lot of success you've had is because you've had all those conversations with all those people. I know for me, I'm a much different person than I was 5 years ago because of all the conversations I've had, even just on the cool? 94 that I've had in this podcast, that have changed my life. And so it's as lonely as we make it. And so for the entrepreneurs and for the people out there that are listening to this, like, again, that's why this podcast exists. There are real life people out there that you can reach out to.
And you're listening and you're like, these guys sound like me, or they're talking about things that I think about once in a while. No, it's so amazing we can be so connected.
Yeah.
It's so amazing that I can actually listen to the thinking processes of men and women that are successful or striving, and I'll never meet them. But I might find my brothers and sisters out there just digitally, listening to their stories. It's a gift what you're doing. I think it's a really powerful contribution. And I think for the business owner who's, we're all trying to put the pieces together. And it's not like it's just like a Rubik's Cube and it has only so many sides and colors. It's like, oh, no. It's always changing.
Yep.
Sometimes you look at the Rubik's Cube and you're like, there's an extra side. Now there's like, they added plaid. Like, it's crazy. And it requires a tenacity. Yeah, I think we're not wired to necessarily do it alone. And it's just a hand on the shoulder or hearing a story of somebody that's relatable that you can kind of say, okay, this jackass can do it. I can do it, or whatever. That's incredible. That's a great gift to give. Yeah. I think that the journey's, you're right. It can be lonesome, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. And look at us. We've started off virtual conversation that ended up with you driving all the way down here from Holland.
I was very happy to.
I appreciate having you in.
It's my pleasure, brother.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.